It's got to be an ennobling, exciting vision. And I think a big part of that is clear purpose, having a purpose that's more than just making a paycheck. And that when people see an exciting, compelling vision and they feel like it's attached to doing important work, making a difference, those are the things that, in my opinion, breathe life in an organization, that hold the culture together. I have a phrase, I just wrote an article on this yesterday, culture equals cash. It's probably, in my opinion, working with lots of companies, the place can have the biggest positive or negative impact. A great culture will lift people up, and a toxic culture will drive people away.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. In our fast-moving world, leaders are expected to make things better. They're expected to improve upon the present. They're expected to show the path to a future that's somehow better than what people currently have or experience. Poor leaders just maintain mediocrity. Harsh words it may seem, but in this age of sound bites and image control, true and sustainable performance excellence seems to be the exception, not the norm. Some business people appear satisfied with managing the status quo. Many up-and-comers seem to have a sense of entitlement rather than a passion for earning their way. As the saying goes, only mediocrity can be trusted to be always at its best. Fortunately, there are some excellent leadership practitioners out there who are willing and able to challenge mediocrity head-on. One of those practitioners is this episode's guest, John Spence. John is author of a terrific book titled Awesomely Simple: Essential Business Strategies for Turning Ideas into Action. John is a coach and consultant for companies ranging from Microsoft, IBM, GE, and Abbott, to Merrill Lynch, AT&T, and Verizon. He's also lectured at more than 90 colleges and universities, including Harvard, Cornell, Stanford, and the Wharton School of Business. John, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you very much. It is truly an honor to be here with you.
Happy to have you. Now, you say some leaders inadvertently enable mediocrity. What does that typically look like? What are the implications, and what's the best cure?
I always, when I'm giving speeches, pick on Bob. And I will ask people to imagine the worst person, the lowest performing employee in their entire company. And then I say, now realize that person sets the standard of excellence for your entire organization. If they come to work every day, they get a paycheck, they carry your business card, and their performance is mediocre, one of two things happens. Either everybody else's performance drops to that level, or your very best people get frustrated and leave. So with someone like that, I believe that you have to set very clear standards. I think the foundation of accountability is exceedingly clear expectations, and then hold that person accountable and everyone for meeting or exceeding those expectations. And you know as well as I've done, you've done this for years, when you finally decide that Bob should leave the company, you almost always hear the same thing from the rest of the folks, which is, what took you so long?
Right. A clear vision of the desired future is, of course, important in any change effort. How can a leader breathe life into the organization's vision so people can genuinely internalize and embrace it?
Well, you've got two questions here about vision and also about change. So let me address both of them. The first one around vision, and it's got to be an ennobling, exciting vision. And I think a big part of that is clear purpose, having a purpose that's more than just making a paycheck. And that when people see an exciting, compelling vision and they feel like it's attached to doing important work, making a difference, those are the things that, in my opinion, breathe life in an organization, that that hold the culture together. I have a phrase, I just wrote an article on this yesterday, that culture equals cash. It's probably, in my opinion, working with lots of companies, the place can have the biggest positive or negative impact. A great culture will lift people up, and a toxic culture will drive people away. And then vision for change is, to me, the idea, and we've both studied John Cotter's stuff. To me, the first step is an irresistible case for change, is you have no choice, like AI. A lot of people, I don't want to use it. Nope, sorry. You don't have a choice here.
It's here.
So helping the leaders set a precedent that change is coming, whether you like it or not. What was it? General Shinsetsky, can't see his name, said, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less.
Exactly.
But then pairing that up with a vision of the new future. So, let's use AI. AI is here. It's not going away. You have no choice. But if you use it as a tool to assist you, it helps you do your work easier and better, which most people would be pretty excited about.
Right. Now, you rightfully suggest that leaders should dream big dreams. What advice do you offer for making those dreams clear and actionable? And you indicated, rightly so, that the vision of an organization and the culture and the expectations for performance need to be upfront. So what can leaders do to help people embrace big dreams?
It's funny. I was reading an article a couple of months, maybe a year ago, and it was talking about leaders as storytellers. And I thought, come on, man, I'm not a storyteller. And then I realized mostly what I do is tell stories about customer experiences and dreams and where we could go and what it could be like. And the best leaders I work with that want to breathe, life and get people excited can have pull together, look for, and I call it holding in my back pocket, a number of stories so that when you get in a certain situation, you can lean on a story that explains sort of where we are, where we're going, what other organizations have done, what you've done in the past, what friends have done. And I think stories engage people more than just facts and data. Have to have the facts and data. And when I talk about clear expectations, I talk about setting binary metrics. It's 1-0, black, white, yes, no, no guessing. I'm a guy for tons of little phrases. My favorite phrase here is ambiguity breeds mediocrity. If people don't know what success looks like and how it's going to be measured, you can't hold them accountable for it. But like you and I are discussing, I think there needs to be a compelling story or set of stories about what an amazing future could be ahead of the organization.
It reminds me of a lady I interviewed recently whose father years ago had founded a company that was a manufacturing company. So most of the people who worked for him never saw customers until he started taking them out of the factory and taking them out to visit face-to-face with customers. And in that way, they heard the stories firsthand of how what they were manufacturing helped real people. And he said it made all the difference in the world in the level of engagement in the workplace.
Yeah, I have two quick stories that are both pretty meaningful. I worked for a client years ago that makes gearboxes. Doesn't sound very sexy, but they made them
unless you need one, and then you need one.
Unless you need one, and they made them for oil rigs and huge air conditioning systems. But they also made them for aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines. And when I was there, they'd bought a company that made gearboxes for helicopters. And on the first day, they brought all the employees together when he was the new CEO, about 400 people into a giant hangar where they rebuilt helicopters. And they said, before I begin, I want to introduce our top customer in the world. And a general walked out covered with medals, the scrambled eggs, everything. And he walked up to the podium. I was there and saw it and looked out over the crowd and said, y'all make gearboxes for my helicopters for the Army. Both my sons fly helicopters in Iraq. Don't kill my boys. Wow. And then he walked away.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other one, quickly, I have another friend that owns a company that makes prosthetics, legs, specializes in legs, and they call it crutch in, walk out. When someone comes in and they get a new leg, they walk through the entire office and thank everybody. So the person that's back there unpacking equipment or packing boxes or doing accounting or whatever gets to see someone literally walk on a new leg for the first time. And like you were saying, make that direct connection, being me doing this little paperwork here allowed that person to walk out of here.
The ripple effect.
Yeah.
That can be very powerful. Now, John, a lot of people seem to talk about alignment as though it's the magic elixir of organizational performance. What does alignment mean to you? And what are some key things to do to move it from buzzword to reality?
Alignment means to me, especially on an executive team, is everybody understands what the goal is, the direction we're moving in, and they're all committed to it. So one of the times, when I do some coaching, I see an executive team where maybe one executive doesn't really believe in the vision or doesn't believe in the strategy, and they're pulling in a different direction. They're dragging their oars on the boat or trying to drill holes in it and pour water in it. So alignment to me, you're going to find out, Roger, I live by phrases. As goes the leadership team, so goes the entire organization.
Sure.
If I have alignment at the top of the business and we all agree in the goals, we see the vision, we're personally committed to it, and it's clear to everyone around us that we're all on the same team going in the same direction, that helps the rest of the organization align. Some of the biggest problems I've seen is this is how you get silos. This is how you get, people in different organizations that are hoarding information and hoarding resources because they don't see that we all have the same goal.
I actually had a client one time, a large international engineering firm, where different departments in that company were bidding against each other for the same client. I had never seen anything quite like that.
It's unfortunately not uncommon in some of the very large companies where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, or compensation drives behavior. And if your job is to get the biggest contract you can, it doesn't matter if you, in some organizations with poor values and bad leadership, if I have to poach that from another department in my own company, I'm the one that gets rewarded for getting that revenue. It still comes into the company, but I don't, if you get the business, I don't get the business. I have, unfortunately, and salespeople go all the way down to the individual level, poaching clients from each other within the same company. A classic example, like you said, of misalignment.
For sure. Now, let's talk a little bit about decision making. Good decision making is, of course, one of the ingredients of effective leadership. To the extent possible, good leaders tend to involve others in key decisions. Tell us, if you would, about the best practices that you've seen and would suggest.
Yeah, I was actually with a coaching client talking about this yesterday. A couple of things. I think to be a good decision maker, you need to have a framework, not a step, but an idea of how you make decisions. The gentleman I was talking to yesterday was a senior leader, and he had someone coming up the ranks who was fairly young and was afraid to make decisions because she didn't have the experience. So I said, I think you need to help her find some questions to ask, some ways to look at things, explain how you make decisions. He was mentioning that she's, like I said, afraid to make decisions. And I taught him a framework about risk analysis and it's super simple: probability and impact. What is the probability something will go wrong? And what is the impact, negative impact, if it did? If it's low probability, low impact, delegate it away immediately. It doesn't really matter. If it's high probability but low impact, that's a great learning opportunity. Give it to someone. If they fail, nothing bad happens. If it's low probability and high impact, that's where you start to bring people in and ask, tell them to go get information, bring in data. And when it's high probability, high impact, that's where you want all the key people in the room helping you do scenario planning. So, for example, he started teaching her, and I call them level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 decisions. She'd come to him, he goes, that's a level 1, or that's a level 2. You make the decision. You've got more information than I do. So I think you have to trust your people too, to be comfortable to delegate them. But you also have to say, this right here, as he said in the meeting yesterday, business isn't going to go out of business if you make a mistake like this. It's not much money. It'll be okay. Let's just learn from your experience. And that means sometimes you have to fail to figure out what not to do next time. And I'm going to say something other, and I'd like your feedback on this because you've been doing this a while. early in my career, I was big on data. When people go, trust your gut, I'm like, oh, come on, trust your gut. I mean, I have a big one. There's a lot to trust there. And then I realized I read an article that said intuition, trusting your gut, is really just pattern recognition. It's going back over the things that have happened in your life, connecting the dots, and then connecting them forward a little bit and saying, I've seen this before, and I think it might end up where I am. And the gentleman I was working with yesterday was big on trusting his gut. What have you seen?
Well, what you just told me reminded me of an experience I had years ago. I was head of global communication at Campbell Soup Company, and one of our many subsidiaries was Swanson Frozen Foods. Mm-hmm. The CEO invited me in his office one day and said, Roger, what do you think of our frozen chicken? And I said, I think it tastes like cardboard. And he said, you're my man. I said, what do you mean? He said, I want you to find out what's going on with our chicken sales. And I said, I'm not an expert with chickens. He said, that's fine. You know how to ask questions. So he gave me free rein to gather information wherever I could. I went down, the company it still is in South Jersey, but I went down to Arkansas where the biggest manufacturing plant was for frozen chicken and talked with a lot of people. Long story short, I found out that they had been recommending new equipment and new processes for years, and they'd get it in the budget, but every year, just before it was time for executive bonuses to come out, that budget would be pulled by one of the senior vice presidents because, lo and behold, it affected his bonus.
Yep.
So I went back and told the CEO, I said, there's some decision-making issues here, probably some integrity issues too. Mm-hmm. We made some changes, and the sales of the production, the quality, and the sales of Swanson frozen chicken went way up. It was all back to a decision-making malfeasance, if you will.
But I think you hit on the key idea, which is you said, I went down and asked a lot of questions.
Right.
Great leaders listen and ask questions way more than they talk. I think curiosity, actually, I did a research project of more than 10,000 high potential employees at top companies around the world. And I asked them, what are the characteristics of an ideal leader? And one of them at the top of the list was being a great communicator. But they did, yes, you got to stand up and talk about the vision and the strategy. But they said, what I really want is someone who's curious, that asks great questions, and then is an intense and focused listener, writes down what I say and takes action on it. That's the two most important communication or leadership skills around communication. And I tend to agree with them.
And in that instance, the questions I asked were mostly naive questions. I didn't have an agenda. I just wanted to gather information. I didn't know anything about their processes. I got pretty educated because I asked so many questions. And then it became really clear what the issue was. But it started with asking questions. Speaking of questions, what is today the single most important or common issue that you see with your clients? 10 or 12 years ago, you told me it was lack of accountability. Has that changed?
Yes and no. So during the Great Recession, I noticed there was a pattern in companies that were struggling. And this is going to tie all this together well. The first one was lack of a vivid, compelling, and well-communicated vision and strategy for growth. So the senior team kind of knew where they wanted to go, and they might have had a strategy, but if you went one or two levels down, nobody had any idea. And under stress and pressure, that instability, that lack of direction was very difficult, which led to the problem. Accountability was number 3, still big, but the biggest problem I see right now is lack of courageous communication or lack of psychological safety. That people, back then, and I see it now, they know there's problems, they know there's issues, they know there's challenges, but they're afraid to speak up and say anything for fear of, retribution, looking silly, being shot down. I sat in a meeting the other day and...
Canceled?
What? Yeah, canceled, yeah. I sat in a meeting the other day, 4 senior executives of a multi-billion-dollar company, and they had huge problems. No one wanted to talk about it. They just they hoped it would go away. Hope is not a strategy.
No, and it won't go away. Well, I see that a lot of places, and I talk with a lot of people who say pretty much what you're saying, is that many people out in the workplace today don't know how to step up to an uncomfortable conversation courageously and respectfully. They don't have the skill. They know that they don't have the skill, so they just don't try.
Yeah.
And that's deadly.
You know, you and I were talking before we got on that I'm in the latter part of my career. You're still cranking at 81. I'm 61. And I've decided as I move through the latter part of my career that I wanted to put a stake in the ground or on something that I would focus on. And I've decided that focus is going to be on loving your employees. But the idea here is moral love. And moral love is acting with honesty and integrity and transparency and treating your people with respect, about genuinely caring about them as an individual, not just a worker. That doesn't mean you have to be their best friend or their therapist.
Right.
And then, I was working with another client where they had a hard time. We were talking about loving your employees. I said, you have to love them enough to hold them accountable. And there's a difference between being polite and being kind. Polite is looking the other way and not saying anything because it's uncomfortable. Kind is stepping up and saying things that might be uncomfortable because I love you enough that if I don't tell you this, you're going to fail. And if you fail, I'm going to fail too. So to me, you have to love your employees enough to hold them to a high standard and hold them accountable to that standard.
Well, let's dig a little deeper on that. You teach your clients a 5-step process for increasing accountability. Tell us a little bit about those 5 steps.
So it's pretty straightforward. Try to keep things simple. Step 1 is 100% clarity plus appropriate authority and resources. If I'm going to hold someone accountable for what I call a mission critical project, not something small, but something that's going to impact the company, I need to invest the time to sit down with that person and explain in excruciating detail what success looks like, how we're going to measure it, what the binary metrics are, what resources they have, what decision-making authority, on and on and on. So there is no ambiguity. Then step 2 is 100% agreement. And I always ask people to write this out. Write out what you believe is the goal here. Based on everything I just told you, everything we talked about, I want you to put in your own words what you're going to be held accountable for, all those metrics I just talked about. And then I want 2 sentences at the end. I believe this is a reasonable goal and I accept 100% accountability. Then you both sign it. It's what I call an accountability agreement. Step 3 then is track progress. They know their goals. How are you doing? And most clients I work with, and probably you too, pretty simple: green, yellow, red. Green, you're doing great. Yellow, you're struggling. Right. Red, we're in trouble. And here's where there's sort of a difference. Most people think that you track them to punish them. Oh, you're in the red, whatever. Step number 4 in my process is coach. If someone slips from green to yellow, you don't yell at them. You go and coach them and you help and you support them. Doesn't mean you do their job for them, but you want them to get back in green. You want everybody in green. And as soon as people realize that tracking doesn't equal punishment, tracking equals help, then they're fine with being tracked and actually ask to be tracked more because they want to get help before they start to fail. Then the last step is celebrate success and refuse to tolerate mediocrity. Most companies, if they just did the first 2, 100% clarity and 100% agreement, they would be in the top 10% of organizations with a culture of accountability.
Well, and when you have that kind of clarity, it's easier to create and maintain a culture that reinforces all the good things. Yeah. And as you've heard this expression, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I totally believe that. You get 2 companies that are competing, they can hire some of the same people. They can buy some of the same equipment. What's the differentiator is usually the culture, how they treat their people. This can't be overemphasized, I don't think.
No, it can't be. I do a lot of strategy work. And, if you've got proprietary processes or, something that's got a patent on it, that's a differentiator. But for most organizations, you just hit it. There are 5 basic differentiators. The first one is people. if I truly have great people, and then we'll combine it immediately with culture. I have great people with a strong culture of engagement. It's very hard to steal them away. And my framework is difficult, if not impossible. If you have amazing people and an amazing culture, it is difficult, if not impossible, to steal them. Number 3 is customer relationships. If you have really strong relationships with your customer, you know them well, a lot of loyalty, strong ties, that is difficult, if not impossible, for your competition to take away or copy. The next one's brand. If you've got a trusted brand like Swanson or Campbell's, nobody's going to out tomato soup Campbell's. Just ain't going to happen. And then the last one is data. And I think a lot of organizations are sitting on a gold mine of data about their customers, their market, their competition, their processes, all that stuff. And they don't use it as effectively as they could.
Right. They're sitting on it, as you say.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
What leadership lessons can people take from the economic turmoil that we've seen and experienced in recent years?
So you and I are talking about a little bit. I think you need to really, really love your people, but especially take really good care of your best people. And it's interesting, this is even more important in smaller companies. If you've got 100,000 employees and 500, are mess ups, Bobs, it's not going to impact the company that bad. But if you have 10 employees and 2 of them are not, doing well, you're going to have to make sure you take care of them. The courageous communications. And the other thing I believe is this is the time to build the best products you've ever built and deliver the best customer service ever. I used to own an advertising firm, owned one for about 9 years. And we focused mostly, because I like to fish, on fishing boats and resorts.
Right.
So every company I've built, I tried to build it around things that I would like to get paid to do on vacation. But when the recession hit, we went to our clients and said, we're firing you. We're closing down the shop, because right now you don't need to spend a ton of money on advertising or marketing. You're doing a great job already. But the boats you're selling, which were, $250,000, $500,000, you're going to sell them through referrals. So right now, invest all your money on keeping your people upskilled, trained, taken care of, loyal, excited, motivated, and make sure that you have the highest level of excellence in your products and services, and you'll make it through this just fine.
Well, that was a great way to build trust with people too.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially say, you don't need us right now. Well, you can be sure that when they do need you, they have your number.
Yeah. Well, I've lived my entire career, and I know you have too, by help everybody you can as much as you can, and it'll all work out fine. I mean, I think it was Zig Ziglar, who you and I both know well. If you just help enough other people get what they want, you'll get everything you want. I'm a guy that believes to just give value as much as you can. And in the end, people will remember your number. And when they need help or they know someone else that needs help, you're going to be at the top of the list because you've given them value and treated them with respect, and they trust you. That's about as good as you could do in business.
Sure. I actually fired a client one time. They invited me to a senior management retreat, and they wanted me to give a talk. And so I gave a talk. And then at the end, I said, you folks are such nice folks. I've had dinner with many of you. I've been in some of your homes. You have wonderful families. But when you get together as a senior management team, you're impossible. You just really don't convince me that you really want to work together. So I know we have a contract. I'm going to step back. I'm not going to be sending you any invoices. When you all decide that you're really serious about working together, you have my number.
Yeah.
Well, it took about a year and a half, but I got a call from one of the people in the room, a woman who had been promoted to senior vice president. And all she said when I picked up the phone, she says, "Hello, Roger, we're ready."
That's awesome.
And I said, okay. So,
Well, I think that it's a little bit what you and I get paid to do sometimes is have the difficult conversation that they're not having.
right.
The client I'm with right now, I said, this is a very dysfunctional senior executive team. You guys know this, but you're not willing to discuss it. And if you don't figure this out together, I can help a little bit, but this is really your team. Most of you won't be working here in a year. And they all agreed. Sat there, well, at least we got that out on the table now. And, we can get this fixed as long as we admit there's a problem.
Exactly. John, you're a big believer in thoughtful reflection. What do you see as the advantages of that for people who somehow feel they just don't have time for such a thing?
It drives me crazy when executives I work with, I go, why don't you sit down at the end of the day, just take 15 minutes to go back over what happened today. How did I treat my people? How is the organization doing? Look at a few key numbers, maybe. I don't have time. Like, if you don't have time to think about your business, you're probably doing something wrong. I think, it's my belief, having done this, that taking 15 or 20 minutes at the end of every day to think back about how did I lead today? Is there something popping up in the marketplace? To think through decisions, to think through, did I make the right decision? Did I make a mistake that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go? That sort of reflection allows you to make better decisions going forward and to be a better leader because you're focused on the things that are important for your company and your people. Because if you get caught up with the wheel going all the time, putting out fires, you're not taking time to think about the most important things. We talked about this. You should be delegating. I learned when I ran larger companies, I figured out eventually that about 60% of the stuff that I was involved with, I didn't need to be involved with. I just thought it was cool because I was a CEO.
Right.
I gotta have what color should the team softball shirts be? Blue. And I realized I need to be talking to stakeholders, working on strategy, and making sure that our culture is fantastic. And I'm going in and meeting everybody and getting a chance to know them so that and let them know they're important to our company. Other than that, wow, I can't think of something that's more important for a leader to spend time on than that.
Well, and then there's developing people in the organization so that when they rise in the organization, they're prepared. I'll never forget, I worked many years ago with a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar energy company. And when he was president of the company, he was treated like an intern, essentially, by the founder. And so when he became the chairman, he had no preparation at all.
Yeah.
So he invited me to see him one time, and he said, Roger, I want you to write me a speech. And I said, well, I used to write speeches. I don't write speeches anymore. And he said, but you could, couldn't you? I said, well, sure, I could. And anyway, I said, who's your audience? He said, well, I don't have an audience yet. And I said, you want me to write a speech for a non-existent audience? And he said, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be asked to give talks. And I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And he said, well, I want to talk about leadership. And I said, well, what would you like to say about leadership? And he said, that's why I'm asking you to write the speech for me. And I'm kind of slow sometimes. It occurred to me, he didn't really want the speech. He didn't know how to ask for coaching. He had never received coaching, and he had been in that company for about 35 years. He had never been prepared for the job of running a multi-billion-dollar company. And so the company had failed him. And I think a lot of companies can fall into that trap. You need to prepare people as they come up through the ranks.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Gallup just came out with their new 2024 Global Employee Engagement survey.
Right.
That showed that only about 21% of employees are actually engaged in their work worldwide. And I won't go through all the numbers, but when it went through it, they said the single biggest group that's struggling is managers. And there was 3 reasons. One was training. They said that according to this, up to 50% of managers globally got zero training. They were promoted because of performance into a place, famous Peter principle, into a position with no formal training, no help, no nothing, just thrown into high stakes situations saying, figure it out. Number two is, you'll love this, was coaching, is they didn't know how to coach their people, didn't know how to grow their own people. And then the third one was well-being, mental health. So the three biggest issues were, I'm not trained to be a leader. I don't know how to train my own people and coach them. And I am so burned out and stressed and anxious and overwhelmed. I'm having a hard time just keeping up with my own work. And
then in a situation like that, it just repeats itself over and over and over.
Yeah, and managers that struggle have teams that struggle.
Exactly.
I mean, the ripple effect goes all the way through the whole organization.
Yes. Well, let me ask you this, John. What question do you wish I had asked but didn't, and how would you respond?
Since I get to do podcasts, I get this question every now and then, and I have a pat answer. I was asked to do a TED Talk on the most important thing I've ever learned in my life. And that's a lot from you and I. That's a lot of stuff to look back over. And I look back to something one of my college professors taught me, who's still 35 years later, a close friend, and we go to breakfast. He's still a mentor. And I won't go through the whole backstory, but this was what I learned. You become what you focus on and like the people you surround yourself with. Whatever you read, whatever you study, whatever you learn, whatever you fill your mind with, and whoever you choose to spend your time with directly determines what your life will look like a decade from now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, John. As always, you've been very generous with your time, and your insights are a valuable resource for aspiring and current leaders alike. To learn more about John and his work, go to johnspence.com. That's John Spence, SPENCE.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, Dana Perino, David Ulrich, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. We appreciate those 5-star reviews, and if you leave a comment, it keeps those algorithms promoting our podcast across the world. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.